Good evening. I am happy to welcome you at our broadcast on a topic of great interest in today's multidisciplinary research. We'll address the implications of neurosciences for executive functioning, including cognition, memory, and behavioral tendencies. Specifically, cognitive impairment and dementia are frequent difficulties nowadays, generating increased disability and multiple psychosocial consequences. We'll discuss several questions that such topics might bring together with Professor Mark Slevin, Professor of Cell Pathology, the Director of the Advanced Medical and Pharmaceutical Research Center of our university, as well as a Fellow at the Royal College of Pathologists. Professor Slevin was also the Manchester Met Lead on Dementia Research and is currently the Senior Associate Editor of some pivotal biomedical journals, including Brain Pathology and Nature Scientific Reports. Professor Slevin, thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
It's a pleasure. Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Okay, I know that your main research interest is related to the topic of dementia and actually the implications of neurosciences for neuroinflammation and neuropsychiatric disorders. So I would like to start by asking you what are actually the major implications of neurosciences research for dementia and cognitive functioning?
Yes, so thank you. It is very interesting that there's a strong link between those items that you've mentioned. So neuroscience is, of course, inextricably linked to neuropsychological conditions. Mm-hmm. In this case, there are a variety of risk factors which predispose somebody, so not just to developing the condition or the illness, so the psychiatric illness, but also then a continuation toward cognitive impairment, mm-hmm. and beyond that, potentially dementia. Mm. So many individuals with a variety of conditions, like ADHD spectrum disorders, have 2, 3, 4 times the risk of developing dementia than a person who doesn't have a condition such as this. So it's very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So neuroscience has a very, very important role to play. Mm-hmm. So you're starting from what would be the risk factors, what would be the important triggers that may sort of give somebody that likelihood of going on to develop, because not all of individuals with neuropsychiatric condition will go on to develop cognitive impairment, only some. So some of the questions that neuroscience should try to answer are and probably using in the future personalized medicine, mm-hmm. such techniques, besides clinical technique, besides imaging, but also AI, so machine learning, new algorithms that would identify the individuals at highest risk, and also those people that will be likely to respond to a particular type of treatment. Okay. So I think neuroscience then has a very, very important role. Understanding the triggers, the key mm-hmm. biomarkers, the substances and the changes which are occurring. And also, we can never forget genetics and epigenetics. So profiling of genetics and epigenetics changes as we go through life, which also further predispose specific and particular individuals to developing cognitive decline, and whether that will then go on to become dementia in the future. Mm-hmm. So, if I understood correctly, it's this interplay between nature, like the biological vulnerability, and nurture in a way, or the environmental factors, right? Yeah. So environmental factors definitely play a role. And what would be critical is for the team, so the medical health team, so the neuropsychologist, potentially psychiatrist, the clinical healthcare specialists, the biologists and scientists, all working together to identify the individuals who are at the highest risk, and then working out the best protective mechanism. And it seems that from one condition to another, so from all the types of disorders which are including even from sleep disorders through depression to ADHD, etc., will be slightly different, although there are things in common between them all, like, as you mentioned at the beginning, inflammation. So inflammation, inflammatory pathways, which can be chronic within an individual. So raised levels of inflammation can be present over a prolonged period of time. And this is definitely an important risk factor when considering the development of a condition and a disease, but specifically cognitive impairment, neurodegeneration, and then something like Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia.
Very interesting. So this inflammation is actually a core process or a core mechanism in all of these. Are there any other risk factors very, very important here to mention?
I think there are, but if we're referring specifically to neuropsychiatric conditions, then so far it's not really understood. So over the last few years, the impact of inflammation has started to be seen, and so various drugs that are used in the treatment just by chance, then those which are reducing inflammation, or individuals who are being treated with a comorbidity, so let's say for diabetes or autoimmune disease, that is actually reducing significantly that chronic raised inflammatory level, is also supporting effective therapy for the neuropsychiatric condition and potentially reducing the likelihood of developing neurodegeneration. And this has been known for quite a few years, that inflammation is core to damage within the brain in terms of neurological damage to the neurovascular unit, which is those groups of cells together within the brain that signal.
Very, very interesting, right. So, when we think about dementia and cognitive impairment, usually we think about something that is kind of irreversible in a way. So, as far as we know from your research and research in general, are there any ways in which we could reverse this process, or we could at least prevent it from happening, or even treat it maybe?
Yeah, so let's go to the first point. No. We wouldn't be able to reverse the damage. So there's metabolic processes in the brain which are then pathologically affected, and this is not reversible because once you have damaged those small, very sensitive units and the neurons within the brain, then they are dead or dying, or so they cannot be revived and repaired. So this is technically not really reversible. But to halt or slow down the process is absolutely possible. These are the aims now. I mean, billions and billions of pounds are being spent, particularly on dementia, but not on therapeutics specifically, because this is very difficult, but actually on very, very early identification, pre-symptomatic, before the damage occurs in the brain, if possible, to identify individuals at higher risk as well, and in this case then make as many changes as you can. For example, lifestyle changes. You can look at things like inflammation, diabetes, any other comorbid risk factors, and then try to slow down any potential development of a condition within someone who is susceptible. So that would be the plan and the aim over the next decade or so, I think.
Okay, so it sounds encouraging, I guess, and
it's encouraging if we accept that always people say prevention is better than cure. In this case, there isn't really a cure, but prevention can be possible in the future, I think.
So these lifestyle factors matter a lot in this way. So I think these epigenetic mechanisms and all of these related mechanisms actually. So what are the main lifestyle changes that a person at high risk could engage in?
Yeah, so they are fairly generic, so you will be looking at exercise, you'll be looking at diet particularly. So So looking at diet, everybody says, yeah, diet, eat carefully and stuff. But and look at, the cardiovascular risk factors, vascular risk factors, because these are critically important for brain health, for example. But really, it's also about, well, what is the impact of what you're eating on gut health? Would you, if you are, what is the flora of the gut? And how can that impact on systemic inflammation, for example? If you have periodontitis, that gives you potentially systemic inflammation. And so the analysis of this, and there are big studies now ongoing, analyzing gut health and looking at systemic inflammation and looking at risk factors for development of neurodegenerative complications and disease. And they are linked very, very closely together. So lifestyle changes would be healthy eating, healthy living, exercising, looking after your vascular system in general, so the cardiovascular system. And then, the things are, this is our limit. So if we have certain spectacular drugs, which will, for example, maintain our glucose levels at the right level, and so we avoid diabetes, then they might also support individuals who are at particular risk. And in order to identify those factors, we need to do a genetic and epigenetic screening as well.
Okay. So this is for the future, like a screening process?
Yeah, theoretically somebody could do a lot of these things now, but they will not be available. So you would have to go and speak to a specialist, and then you would have to organize it and coordinate it yourself.
To access such services and such assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And you mentioned the involvement of a multidisciplinary team, since we have a problem with the biopsychosocial, let's say, framework. So here we talk about physicians, we talk maybe about physical therapists and pharmacists maybe. So what would be the role of the psychologist from the practical point of view in this interdisciplinary therapeutic team?
Well, I think that, the cognitive profiling is absolutely critical, isn't it? And it's not easy, okay? So to actually, I think, subclassify and stratify and individualize a condition is very, very difficult. Okay, so I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a neuropsychologist,
right.
But from what I understand, it is very, very difficult to profile accurately, then to monitor, of course. So whilst we're looking at all of these potential avenues for supporting effective treatment, looking for responding people by manipulating and modulating lots of factors, we're going to need to profile, continuously manage and monitor. And this will be in the form of clinical studies and clinical trials. And so the psychologist and the neuropsychologist would be, invaluable. They have to be part of this team. So they will be performing a significant role within that, that set of procedures. Sort of when you think about, you would be taking a group of individuals. They may have autoimmune disease, so you may be understanding what the link between autoimmune disease, the secretion, expression of different molecules, their profiling, what type of condition that they have, and how that treatment is going to be therapeutically, effectively modulated. But at the same time, what can that impact be on the neurocognitive function? So I think there's different levels. It's complicated, but right at the center of that is the psychologist, the neuropsychologist.
Understood. So actually we talk about this refinement and this nuanced, let's say, assessment of cognitive functioning, including here probably memory, these abilities to or this spatial temporal orientation and learning processes, how they work, what is the impact of, let's say, medicine or drug for this functioning.
Exactly. Yeah, and so even there will be a lot of imaging involved in these types of studies, functional MRI, for example.
Right.
You have to understand which parts of the brain are being utilized or not effectively, and how pharmaceuticals will modify that, and also other changes, okay, which are modifying. So I think it's a really exciting area and field for research, and there's a long way to go, but that's good for individuals and for patients, because I think there's it's a bright future for terms of potential therapeutics. So.
That's very good, yes. So we know that another role of the psychologist is related to speech therapy, for example, after stroke, or when dementia occurs, to prevent it from getting worse and so on. So it's speech therapy, like learning some skills that the person lost, let's say. So is this possible after such an event?
Yeah, so rehabilitation I think is really, really important after stroke. Again, it's something that's not utilized sufficiently, and depending on the severity of the stroke, the type of stroke, etc. Then the earlier in which you can do all of these types of actions, including physiotherapy as well, speech therapy, then the more there is plasticity in the brain. So what you have is the after any type of damage in the brain, of course, you have an infarcted area. It's just a dead area which you can't do very much about. But there's also an area of the brain which was affected but can recover, and this area can stand to benefit greatly by this type of therapy, and so it should be absolutely encouraged. And it has been shown to make clear and significant difference and improvements in patient quality of life and a capability and capacity after stroke.
Very nice. So is this brain's amazing ability to be plastic, neuroplasticity?
Exactly. Yeah. To create new connections which can actually be useful, shall we say, because it's so complicated. But it really works. There are limitations,
of course.
And of course there will always be. Okay, again, prevention is better than the cure, but in this case, early transition, as soon as an individual is stabilized and stable enough, and because also tends to be very common depression after such an event.
Yes, right.
And this is also a fairly complex and not very pleasant after effect and side effect of having brain damage, and it's a neuropsychiatric condition which also in its own right requires a treatment. So this is a secondary thing of importance. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So what about the research part? Because we talked about the therapeutic part, the practical team of management in such cases. So do you think that a psychologist, a person that does research in this area, would contribute to the advancement of this field of study on dementia and cognitive functioning?
Well, I think they have to be, because the neuropsychologist and the psychologist has to be part of the team. There are elements of it which can be satisfactorily done by scientists, for example. So within the laboratory, looking for biomarkers, but the assistance of all of the healthcare professionals is required together. So it's a team. And I think everybody is equally important. So whilst the person in the laboratory looks at the blood, examines it, and looks for an early biomarker or a panel of markers which will indicate someone's absolute risk of developing, let's say, dementia, somebody who has autism, for example. Before that, you have all the profiling. You have to understand who that individual is. Stratify them, manage them, look at them, characterize the illness, monitor, assess, look at them. And the psychologist has to do a lot of this. And without all of that information, the rest of it's not that useful. So, so in terms of research, it is the whole team: the psychologist, the neuropsychologist, the clinician. So for imaging, for example, the clinical history. For then the actual research itself, which also needs to be done within laboratories, but also in clinical trials.
Right, and in this way we can assess actually the significance, now the statistical significance of these changes that occurred when we talk about cognitive functioning, quality of life in general.
Yes, exactly. And I think that at the end, so we're going to use AI a lot in the future. So you have cohorts of individuals who have retrospective, prospective studies, and eventually you'll create algorithms which then allow you to go back and then provide different types of treatment for individuals with specific profiles, and then monitor those individuals as they go through time. And I think that's the way the system should probably will operate in the future. And of course, the neuropsychologist and the psychologist is critical for this.
Very interesting. So that, if I understood correctly, the AI would bring together all this information for creating these algorithms. And actually, it would help for the personalization of the treatment for each case?
Exactly, yes. So let's say you have a prospective study with 10,000 individuals. That's quite a lot, but it's a nice number for power. And then eventually you find that they have this biomarker, they have this genetic profile, they have this epigenetic change, they have this lifestyle characteristic. And you put all of these things together, and you can say with something like a 98% accuracy, hopefully at least, that you are likely to respond really well to this type of treatment. And instead of having to, sort of guess, because it is a little bit of a guesswork at the moment, and another individual respond to this combination of treatment and change and lifestyle and etc. And it will be far, far more effective in the end as we get to this stage.
Yes, I think from all points of view, time management and all of these.
Yeah, and cost.
And cost,
quality of life,
it's efficiency in the end. Okay, that's very interesting. So we are now enthusiastic about the new study program on psychology starting soon at our university, and I know you will be part of the professors team in this program, teaching a discipline that is called understanding the biological mechanisms involved in neuropsychological diseases. So my next question would be, what do you think our future students should learn, should acquire about the, let's say, cognitive assessment and management of these cases like dementia, neurological conditions like multiple sclerosis and other neuropsychiatric conditions?
Yeah. So they need a background. We need to make sure that they understand what neurodegeneration is. What is the concept of it? Generally speaking, what are the processes which trigger the earliest stages of damage in neurodegeneration? What does it look like? What are those biomarkers? What is the current research hot topics in this field? Neuropsychiatric illnesses. Most people, if you would just ask them, even if they have some type of medical training, may not be sure about how strong the link is between neuropsychiatric conditions and dementia. So this needs to be talked about in a lot of detail. Understanding, first of all, profile and understanding about what makes the neuropsychiatric condition. I mentioned a couple of times inflammation. I work a lot on inflammation. It's obviously connected to dementia and the development of other types of illness and conditions. But it's really important to understand the risk factors. One of them is inflammation, but there are many causes of inflammation. So we need to look at those and need to be aware of those when profiling individuals with neuropsychiatric conditions. So they would have a full background of information with this. Lots of case studies, so this would be interesting. The pathological processes would be intertwined within this. So we would say, for example, look at the neurovascular unit, the vascular system, look at the impact of inflammation on things like autophagy, so the ability to remove toxic proteins from the brain. The actual direct effect of proteins, specific proteins that induce inflammation, that remain lodged in the brain, which are raised in neuropsychiatric conditions, and also conditions like autoimmune disease, and which predispose specifically to developing neurocognitive decline.
Okay.
So there is a very, very strong link between those and with some of the other key proteins within the brain, dopamine, serotonin, etc., which are also a focus of therapeutics within some of these conditions. So all of those elements will be embedded within the learning process of the module.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah.
I hope that it will be really interesting for the students, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. So maybe we have a message for those listening to us right now, and what would you say would be most important for preventing these difficulties? Or
Yeah, okay. That's the most difficult question you've asked me today. So the thing is that on the face of it, you think, okay, neuropsychiatry, we're looking at these conditions. When you actually see how closely they mimic and how closely they are connected to what is one of the most serious diseases that we have as in humanity at the moment, and you see the consequences, basically, the number of people that are suffering from these neuropsychiatric conditions now. We didn't even mention sleep disorders and other things. When you put them all together, it's a time bomb. It's really dangerous not to be able to understand them, to try to treat very effectively in order to prevent later development of neurocognitive decline and then dementia, which is significant in the population of people. So the message is that it's really, really a hot topic. It's important. It's an important health concern, but it's also very interesting and not fully understood whatsoever, which makes it also exciting for all types of medical health professional, I think. That's my message.
That's true. Thank you very much. Thank you for all this valuable information.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, and thank you very much for watching us. Have a wonderful evening.